Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some very cool battles in the Master League featuring a perfect IV level 50 Shadow Tyranitar. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, Shadow Tyranitar is a Dark and Rock type Pokemon, and for the moveset, it's running Bite, Crunch, and Stone Edge. And Bite is very useful, allowing Tyranitar to destroy Metagross, Mewtwo, and Giratina Origin. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Perfect IV Shadow Tyranitar in the Master League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a very positive lead, Zacian into Excadrill. Now Zacian is going to want to overfarm in this matchup and wait for Exca to throw first, because Zacian is going to want to tank the drill run before it lowers its defense with a close combat. Zacian is going to tank that damage and fire off the close combat in retaliation. This will be lethal. Opponent is going to let that through. They send in Metagross. We see a pivot into Giratina Origin, and Giratina will be answered with Yveltal. Tried to go for CMB. Yveltal unfortunately goes for the extra and gets an entire Snarl for free. Now this is a very tough matchup for Giratina Origin, so we're not going to see a shield used here. Yveltal fires off the Dark Balls. That gets the Giratina low. Giratina farming up, making it to another Shadow Ball. Unfortunately, Yveltal is just going to tank it and go for the full farm down. Yveltal leaves with so much loaded energy. At this point, though, you can send in the Zacian. Zacian should be able to tank whatever they throw, unless it's going to be a Hurricane. It is going to be the Dark Pulse. Opponent sends in Metagross into the loaded close combat. Close combat into the Metagross, gets the shield, and now it's time for Shadow Hundo Tyranitar. Look at the bites shredding through the Metagross. Metagross fires off the Meteor Mash. They're going to try and make it to another Meteor Mash, but they are not going to be able to. The bite damage is just too oppressive. Back in comes Yveltal. This can only be a Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse not going to KO. Shadow Tyranitar gets the farm down, and that's a good game. Picking up a pretty nice lead in the next match, Zacian into Kyogre. Considering there's the Tyranitar in the back, you have to be happy to see this Kyogre on the lead. Wasting no time, going straight for the Wild Charge. Wild Charge connects, save switch into Giratina, and Giratina will be answered with Dialga. Farming up to the Shadow Ball, baiting with the Ominous Wind, hoping for a shield or a boost. Ominous Wind gets the shield, but does not get the boost. Giratina farming up, making it to the Shadow Ball. This is not going to be lethal, and this means that Dialga can tank this, farm down, and leave with a ton of energy, and that is problematic, because both of the remaining two Pokemon take super effective damage from Iron Head. So this is going to be a bit awkward. In comes Zacian, and Dialga, absolutely loaded on energy, can start forcing shields back. Iron Head is going to force shield number 1, and now going to be able to force shield number 2. So no shields remaining for the Tyranitar in the back. Aggressive switch into Kyogre, and Kyogre will fire off the Surf. Surf is going to be getting the Zacian low. We see a switch into the Tyranitar. Tyranitar bites down. In the back, they have Mewtwo. Mewtwo has to make it to the Focus Blast here. Mewtwo gets to the Focus Blast. That will be lethal, but I don't think the opponent has enough HP remaining to win this game. Zacian looking for the farm down, gets the farm down, and now able to make it to the back-to-back close combats. Close combat number 1 gets the shield, and close combat number 2 will get the KO. Zacian with a sliver of HP takes down Dialga and secures the win. We see a pretty decent lead in the next match, Zacian going up against Dialga. Zacian, of course, can outpace Dialga, but the question is always, is the opponent able to make a catch? This time, they are not. Close combat will be fired into the Dialga, and Dialga will commit the shield. Zacian now heavily debuffed, but even debuffed, the double resistant Dragon Breaths are not going to be doing a lot of damage. Zacian continuing to farm up, looking to throw the close combat at the Dialga, but the opponent makes an incredible catch, catching the close combat onto Lugia. Bad news for the Lugia, however. Lugia now going to have to deal with the perfect IV Shadow Tyranitar. Tyranitar biting through this Lugia. Lugia already below half health. Lugia goes for the Sky Attack. We do see a shield from the Tyranitar. Tyranitar continuing to farm. Lugia makes another charge move with a sliver of HP remaining. It's another Sky Attack. Tyranitar tanks it, gets the farm down, and leaves with so much loaded energy. Back in comes Dialga. Dialga will be met with the Shadow Crunch. Crunch is going to connect, getting the Dialga low. Dialga able to hang on with a sliver of HP remaining, and this is a bit awkward because Dialga with the shield advantage and energy is very powerful. In comes the Giratina, going to send in the Zacian and go for the close combat. Tried to potentially make a catch. Opponent saves the energy on their Dialga, and that is really bad news. Zacian firing off the Wild Charge. Wild Charge will hit for some solid damage into the opposing Zacian, but the opponent can overfarm, go for the charge move. They can even close combat here, and it would be enough to KO. They go for the Wild Charge, and now it's all up to Giratina. Giratina has to try and leave with a move, but I think Dialga has the Draco Meteor loaded. Wild Charge not going to be doing a lot of damage. Giratina can just go for the farm down, going for the Shadow Ball, but loses CMP. Great energy management by the opponent, stored the Draco, down goes the Giratina, and that's game over. We see same leads again in the next match, Zacian into Dialga. Immediate safe switch into Mewtwo, and now it's Shadow Tyranitar time. Opponent did not build up to a Focus Blast, so Tyranitar does not have to respect this. They go for the Shadow Ball. Tyranitar able to absorb that damage and fully bite down. Opponent can send back in the Dialga, but Dialga is not going to appreciate the fast move pressure from Bite as well as the Crunch damage. Tyranitar firing off the Crunch into the Dialga. Dialga is going to let that through. Dialga now starting to get quite low on HP. Dialga looking for the farm down of the Tyranitar and gets it with 1 HP remaining. In comes the Zacian. Zacian can take an Iron Head from this range, but will decide to commit the shield. That is going to KO in the back. Opponent has Kyogre, and that is really, really unfortunate for them. Kyogre is about to get absolutely walled in the back by Giratina. And even worse, Zacian has double Wild Charges loaded, going for Wild Charge number 1. That's going to get the first shield. Wild Charge number 2 will get the final shield or inflict massive damage. Wild Charge gets no shielded. In comes the Giratina. An opponent stops tapping as Giratina gets the win. Picking up a terrible lead in the next match, double nuke Zacian into Giratina. We're going to see an immediate save switch into the mirror, but as long as the opponent throws first, they will always be a Shadow Claw ahead. However, the opponent overfarms, letting this Giratina throw first, and that means this is a true mirror match, but not anymore, as we see the ominous wind boost. Opponent goes for the Shadow Ball, that's going to be shielded. In comes Dialga. Dialga normally has a very good matchup here, but with the boost, Giratina can flip this. Shadow Ball is going to get the shield. Dialga not going to be able to farm down before another Shadow Ball is reached, so Dialga is actually forced to throw energy here. Iron Head will KO the boosted Giratina, and I like the decision to not wait the switch clock. You want to send in the Zacian, go for the close combat right away, and ideally keep the switch clocks misaligned, so hopefully you can fully farm down their Giratina with the Tyranitar. Opponent is going to wait their clock here. They send in the Giratina, farming up energy, sending in the Tyranitar, and they are just able to switch out, and in the back is Zacian, and this is not what Tyranitar was hoping to see. Tyranitar going for the Crunch. Crunch gets shielded and gets a defense drop. The opponent, not knowing Bite Tyranitar counts, may just cost them the game. They go for the Play Rough. That's going to KO. They didn't want to debuff themselves, but this is going to set them up for a very interesting situation here, because Play Rough is not going to be enough to KO, so Zacian can look to farm up and potentially actually win this game. His Wild Charge with the defense drop is going to KO, and Giratina will get taken out by a resisted Wild Charge as well. So countered the entire game. It does not matter, as Zacian gets the win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Zacian versus Dialga. Opponent staying in this matchup. As a Zacian player, you just have to watch for a potential catch. Firing off the close combat will be shielded by the opponent. Zacian continuing to farm. Opponent goes for the catch onto Giratina, and we see a bit of an unfortunate swap, choosing to switch into the mirror instead of bringing in the hard counter of the Shadow Tyranitar. Shadow Ball is going to connect. That does quite a bit of damage, and going to return fire with a Shadow Ball of their own. Now this will hit for a lot of damage if it connects. Opponent double shields, and now with no shields remaining, things are looking quite nice for the Shadow Tyranitar. In comes Shadow Tyranitar, and Tyranitar is going to look to bite all the way down. Opponent goes for the Shadow Ball. Of course, that is going to be resisted. Tyranitar looking for the farm down, but not before Giratina makes another move. Tyranitar starting to run out of HP, but going to no-shield the Ominous Wind anyway, saving shields for the energy from Dialga. Dialga going for the Iron Head here. We see a shield from the Tyranitar. Tyranitar continuing to farm up, and we see a beautiful snipe switching into the Zacian, going for the close combat. Down goes Dialga, in the back is Lugia, and this game is over. Zacian can very comfortably farm up to the back-to-back wild charges, and that should just about do it. Tyranitar does have a move as well, but I don't think that's going to be needed here, as you can just make the back-to-back wild charges. That gets the Lugia down to 1 HP, and that's game over. Picking up a tricky lead in the next match, Zacian into Therian Landorus. Now this is an awkward matchup for Zacian without Play Rough. Zacian will want to wait until the Landorus throws, because obviously it can take a Stone Edge a lot better when it's not debuffed. So we already see the Stone Edge get no-shielded by the Zacian. Zacian farming up till just shy of the back-to-back moves, and is going to fire off the Close Combat. Close Combat is going to connect. Zacian farming up, and we see a very nice catch. Catching a move, it's the superpower onto the Giratina. Giratina, unfortunately, will be punished with a Dialga switch in. Dialga, these Dragon Breaths tearing through the Giratina, as Giratina will return fire with a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is going to connect, getting the Dialga low. Giratina trying to make it to the Ominous Wind, but dies with the move. That is very unfortunate. Zacian left with a move, but loses CMP to Dialga, so Zacian is going to go for the extra fast move. I do quite like that play, understanding that Dialga is going to win CMP, so you may as well get a little bit of extra energy in the process, and now can fire off the Close Combat. Close Combat is going to be shielded. We see a switch into the Tyranitar, but unfortunately Tyranitar is going to be hit with an Iron Head here. Iron Head will grab the final shield. In comes Landorus, and Landorus makes the superpower. This is double super effective damage. Goodbye Tyranitar, and unfortunately it's just too little too late for the Zacian, as another superpower is going to be reached by the Landorus. Superpower takes down the Zacian, and that's game over. We see a very tough lead in the next match, Zacian into Groudon. Honestly, Groudon is tough for this entire team, as there's 0 Pokemon on this team that are comfortable with tanking a Precipice Blades. Farming up to the back-to-back Close Combat, losing CMP to the Groudon, but honestly that's preferred, as Precipice Blades does massive damage, but it does not KO because defense has not been debuffed. Going for the Close Combat, that's going to connect, and we see the Fire Punch catch onto the Giratina. Very nicely done, as that's not going to deal a lot of damage. Groudon farming up a bunch of energy, and we see a beautiful catch. Opponent says, anything you can do, I can do better. Catching the Ominous Wind onto Yveltal, but Yveltal is now going to have to deal with a boosted Giratina Origin. They can go for the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse not going to be enough to KO here, and I don't believe Yveltal is going to be able to farm down without having to take multiple Shadow Balls. Shadow Ball number 1 is going to connect. That does so much damage. Yveltal is going to be forced to throw some energy here. Giratina committing the shield, wanting to preserve the energy, banks it for later, sends in the Zacian, and Zacian will fire off the Wild Charge. This will KO the Yveltal easily. Yveltal commits a shield, back in comes Groudon, and Groudon will go for the Fire Punch, not wanting to risk Zacian making a Close Combat. But now this sets up Tyranitar for a farm down, and then hopefully Tyranitar will do well versus whatever they have in the back. Tyranitar is going to get the farm down. It all comes down to what does this opponent have in the back. We know they have the very low health Yveltal, and they have a Zacian. Zacian, not the best Pokemon for Tyranitar to see. Tyranitar is going to be committing the final shield as Zacian fires off the Close Combat. Wait, this might actually give a win con here. You fire off the Stone Edge, you grab the shield, and you snipe with the Shadow Ball that you saved from earlier. What beautiful gameplay. Shadow Ball KOs. Back in comes Yveltal. Yveltal will be hit with the Ominous Wind. The energy from Giratina comes in useful, and that is a good game. Hopping into the final match, we see the same leads as last game, Zacian into Groudon. As before, you're just going to want to farm up a ton of energy and wait for them to throw first. Groudon is going to oblige. They fire off the Precipice Blades, and that deals massive damage. We see a save switch into Mewtwo, and Mewtwo is going to be met with a Wild Charge. Going for the Undercharge, actually, so this is going to set up a massive farm for the Shadow Tyranitar. They will not make a Focus Blast, so they're going to be forced to fire whatever energy they have here. It turns out they are running Shadow Ball. That does not deal a lot of damage, and Shadow Tyranitar gets the farm down. Back in comes Groudon. Groudon will be met with the Crunch, and the bites are definitely adding up onto the Groudon. Groudon is going to commit the shield. Shadow Tyranitar continuing to farm. At this point, you just call a Fire Punch. We're going to see the no shield and calls the Fire Punch. What a play. These bites getting the Groudon to basically 1 HP. Groudon has 100 energy here. This is going to be tough. Going to send in the Giratina. Do they bait? Do they nuke? Calls a bait. It's the Precipice Blades. And now this is the Fire Punch, but you're rapidly running out of HP. Giratina decides to commit the shield. In the back, it's Lugia. These Dragon Tails adding up and going to fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will hit for a lot of damage. That gets the final shield. In comes the Zacian. Zacian has energy from earlier. The question is, can it withstand the Dragon Tails and make the double Wild Charge? Shields up the Sky Attack, makes it to the double Wild Charge, going for Wild Charge number 1. That connects and makes it to Wild Charge number 2. This will be lethal. Down goes Lugia, and that is a good game. All in all, I've got to say, Shadow Tyranitar has got to be one of the coolest shadows to have a perfect IV of. Granted, I'm totally biased in that opinion because I also happen to have a perfect IV Shadow Tyranitar. It's definitely a difficult Pokemon to use in the Master League, especially with the prevalence of the Primals. Groudon and Kyogre are both very difficult for it to deal with. But man, if you can get it lined up against that triangle of Dialga, Mewtwo, Giratina, Shadow Tyranitar is a lot of fun. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.